The first time my own sister struck me, it was Christmas Eve. Ashley screamed, "Are you deaf or just useless?" Then her open palm cracked across my left cheek in front of 18 relatives. Fireplace. Pine garland. My mother's good china. A sound I will remember more clearly than my own wedding day. I'm Catherine Donovan, 38. I have spent 14 years of my career writing the kind of probate documents that protect families from exactly this. A forged signature, a stolen retirement account, a sister who turns the moment the money runs short. My mother said, "Apologize or leave tonight, Catherine." My father held the door open into the snow. So I walked into 10 below zero, drove the 200 miles back to Portland, and by sunrise, I was reading a forged power of attorney with my own name signed by a hand that wasn't mine. If you've ever been the family member nobody thanked, drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, hit subscribe. What I did next is the reason my sister left a courthouse in handcuffs. My parents live in Bangor, Maine. The house on Holyoke Street, 4 small rooms and a finished basement, half a mile from Husson University. I grew up there. I have driven up from Portland for Christmas Eve dinner every December for the last 16 years. 207 miles on Interstate 95 North, 2 hours and 45 minutes on a clear day. That afternoon, there was new snow on the median near Augusta, and a state truck was salting the right lane. I drove with the radio off. The box on the passenger seat held a stainless steel coffee thermos for my father, 2 pairs of soft wool socks for my mother, and a framed black and white photograph of my grandmother Florence in her garden in 1980, which I had restored at a small shop on Congress Street. I am 40 seconds inside the house before I notice 3 things. First, the granite countertops in the kitchen are not the granite I paid for in the summer of 2023. These are darker stone, veined cream and gray, recently sealed. The $34,700 I wired to the contractor that July was for a different slab. Second, there is a small artificial Christmas tree on the side table by the front window, white lights, a paper star my mother folded 30 years ago. The real tree, 9 feet tall, stands in the living room. I have not seen the small tree before. Third, Ashley is already here. I can hear her in the kitchen. Well, honestly, Mom, you should have just told her. My sister has a voice that pitches up at the end of every other sentence, like she is asking you to agree, right? My mother came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a striped dish towel. She wears the same chin-length silver bob she has worn for 15 years, set every Friday at Maureen's Salon on State Street. Her wedding ring is 41 years old. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "I just want everyone to have a nice night, Catherine. Tonight, please." She touched the hollow above her sternum, fingers to the collarbone, a small habit she has carried since I was 9 years old. I counted 18 people in the house, 4 children at the kid table in the den, 6 adults in the kitchen, 8 in the living room. Aunt Patty in the wingback by the window, the silver Celtic knot at her throat, her library book closed in her lap. Uncle Ray in the recliner. My cousin Brady, 24 years old, second year at Bangor Community College, folded onto a piano bench because we had run out of chairs. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat nearest the kitchen door, nearest the back stairs. The seat my mother had arranged for me, by no accident and no oversight, for 16 years. Then I heard the sentence. My mother stood at the stove with a casserole dish balanced on a folded towel and said to my cousin's wife, "Ashley handled all of it this year, Carolyn. Ashley wrapped the gifts. Ashley made the place cards. Ashley took Mom to her cardiologist in November." I have wired $1,475 to my parents' joint checking account on the 15th of every month since January of 2017. That is 108 months. That is $141,600. I co-signed the new roof in 2020. I paid the refinance fees on the second mortgage in 2022. I paid the contractor for the kitchen with the new granite I did not recognize when I walked through the door tonight. Ashley handled all of it this year. I did not correct my mother. I have a habit my grandmother passed down to me. I count things, always. 7 things were missing from that sentence. I counted them in my head. I drank a sip from my water glass, and I did not say a single word. That was the first. My cousin Brady leaned across the table during the soup course. He held a piece of warm bread in his left hand and asked me what I did for a living. He was being polite. He had not seen me in 3 Christmases. My mother answered before I did. Kate does something with the law in Portland, my mother said. Some kind of office paperwork. I forget what exactly. Some sort of legal thing. 14 years, senior associate at Sutherland and Pike, LLC, the 12th floor of the Cumberland Building in Portland, Harborview, partner track. I draft estate plans and powers of attorney for clients who have built something over 40 years and want to pass it to their children intact. I have 407 active matters on my desk. The short list for partner this year is 3 names. 2 men and me. Probate, I said quietly to Brady. I am a probate lawyer. Brady nodded. He did not know what that meant. My mother was already telling Carolyn about Ashley's eyelash studio in Brewer and how busy Ashley had been with holiday clients. That was the second. Then I saw the watch. Ashley walked into the dining room with the gravy boat balanced on a folded towel. There was a small gold pocket watch on a thin gold chain around her neck, antique, scuffed near the 7 o'clock position on the case, an inscription on the inside of the cover I knew by memory. It was Florence's watch. My grandmother gave that watch to me on the 15th of June, 2010, in room 412 at Eastern Maine Medical Center. She had taken it off her own neck and pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. She said, "Keep them whole, Catherine. They don't know how." She was 82. She had 6 weeks left to live. I have kept the watch in my safe deposit box at Bangor Savings Federal on Exchange Street in Portland. I have taken it out twice in 16 years. Once on the morning of my law school graduation. Once on the morning Jim Sutherland told me I was on partner track at the firm. Both times, I put it back the same afternoon. My mother saw me see it. She did not look at me. She spoke to no one in particular, but loud enough for the table to hear. I gave that to Ashley last Tuesday. Mom would have wanted her to have something nice for the holidays. Ashley wears jewelry. Catherine doesn't. Ashley sat down on my father's right hand and rested her fingertips on the watch as she spoke. Well, honestly, Mom, this looks better on me anyway, right? Kate has more of a minimalist thing. 3 relatives laughed. My father did not look up from his plate. That was the third. At 6:28, my mother carried out the casserole. At 6:31, my father lit the 2-cedar tapers in the brass holders at the center of the table. The smell of cedar resin rose in the small dining room. Ashley said grace. She thanked God for the food, the warmth of the house, the gift of family. She thanked my mother for cooking. She thanked my father for paying for the wine. She thanked Tyler, her husband, the paramedic in the heather gray Henley, sitting 2 chairs from me on the right, for driving her up from Brewer in the snow. She thanked everyone at the table. She did not thank Catherine. 18 people in the dining room. I was the only person at that table whose name did not appear in her prayer. I knew it before she finished the second sentence, and I let her finish anyway. I drank my wine. The Italian red my father had bought from the discount shelf at Hannaford Supermarket because his employee discount cut it from $12 to $9. I drank it slowly. That was the fourth. After dinner, the adults moved to the living room, a fire of split cedar in the iron grate. The good china put away. My mother brought out the photograph albums. Ashley sat at her feet on the rug. I sat in the wingback opposite Aunt Patty. Ashley flipped to a second-grade school photograph of me. 2 front teeth missing, blue plaid jumper, in front of the upright piano at St. Joseph's Elementary in Bangor. "Oh my God, Kate, do you remember this?" she said. "You were 8. You cried in the middle of the school Christmas recital because no one was sitting in the front row. Mom had to come up and walk you off the stage." She was talking to the relatives, not to me. I was 8. The recital was 1995. My mother had the flu that week and stayed home. My father was working a double shift at Bucksport Paper Mill. Florence drove down from Brewer in a borrowed car and sat in the front row for the full 90 minutes, holding a small bouquet of grocery store carnations, and clapped for me at the end. She did not let me cry. On the drive home, she let me hold the carnations in my lap and said, "What I noticed was, Catherine, you didn't miss a single note." Ashley was 4 years old in 1995. She has no memory of that recital. She told the story anyway. In her version of it, I was the girl who cried because no one came. Aunt Patty, across the room, set her library book down on the side table. She opened her mouth as if she were going to say something, then closed it. She looked at me and shook her head once. "Not tonight," the sheikh said. "Not yet." I understood. I was on my own. That was the 5th. At 8:47, I stood up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. My wine glass was empty. The dry heat from the fire had thinned my throat. The route through the dining room was 4 steps. Ashley had pushed her chair back from the table. She was telling Uncle Ray about her studio in Brewer. I stepped behind her. My shoulder brushed her shoulder. It was the lightest contact, the kind of contact you do not feel under a wool sweater. Ashley stood up. "Are you deaf?" she said, "or just useless?" The conversation in the living room stopped. The kid table in the den stopped. The dining room with 18 people inside it went quiet. Her open palm came across my left cheek in a flat, fast arc. The sound was a hard, dry crack, louder in the small dining room with the low ceiling than a hand ought to be. The candles in the brass holders moved with the displaced air. My head turned. My right ear filled with a thin, high ringing. I did not raise my hand. I did not step back. I stood where I was. My left cheek was already warm. Aunt Patty made a small sound in her throat. No one else moved. I have been struck once in my life. It happened in my parents' dining room in Bangor, Maine at 8:47 on Christmas Eve, 2025, in front of 17 witnesses and my sister's husband. My mother walked out of the kitchen. Her hands were wet. She had been at the sink. She looked at Ashley's face, then at mine, then at the floor between us. Her fingers went to her collarbone. "Apologize," she said, "or leave tonight, Catherine." I have replayed that sentence enough times in the last 71 days that I no longer hear it in her voice. I hear it in the voice of a court clerk reading a docket. I have learned to think of her, in that moment, as a witness rather than as my mother. I looked at my father. My father was already on his feet. He had walked from the recliner to the front door in the time it took my mother to finish her sentence. He pulled the storm door open with his right hand, then the inner door. The wind came through the entry and lifted the paper star on the small artificial tree half an inch off its branch. He did not speak. He held the door. I lifted my coat from the hook in the entryway. I lifted my keys from the small ceramic bowl on the entry table. I lifted the gift box from the floor where I had set it on arrival. The thermos, the wool socks, the restored photograph of Florence in her garden. I did not put the coat on. I walked past my father into the cold. The thermometer screwed into the porch post read 10 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The wind out of the northwest was steady at 15 miles an hour. I felt the air go into my lungs and stay there. The door closed behind me. I drove out of Holyoke Street and onto the on-ramp for Interstate 95 South. The dashboard clock read 9:22. My left cheek was still warm. The radio stayed off. I did not turn the heat above 68 degrees because I did not want the cold to leave my hands. At 10:47, I pulled off the highway in Augusta and drove the half-mile back to St. John's Catholic Church on Western Avenue. I parked in the empty lot. Midnight Mass had not yet begun. I sat with the engine running. There is a voice memo on my iPhone, transferred device to device for 16 years. 1 minute and 43 seconds. Recorded on the 15th of June, 2010 at 2:47 in the afternoon in a hospital room at Eastern Maine Medical Center. Florence Donovan, 82 years old, 6 weeks before her death. I had replayed that memo 4 times in 16 years. The morning of my law school graduation. The morning of my Maine bar admission. The morning I closed on the condo. The morning Jim Sutherland told me I was on partner track at the firm. I plugged in my earbuds. I pressed play. Florence's voice came through, smaller than I remembered, the cadence of County Cork softened by 63 years in Maine. What I noticed was, they don't know how to hold themselves together, Catherine. So you keep them whole. They don't know how. The memo ran to its end. I did not press replay. I sat until the first headlights of arriving mass turned into the lot. Then I drove south. I arrived at the condo on Commercial Street in Portland at 12:16 on Christmas morning. I did not turn on a lamp. I sat down on the sofa in my coat. At 4:32, I opened my laptop. I logged into the Vanguard portal where the joint Roth IRA with my parents, the account I set up in 2017, the week Pat retired from Bucksport Paper Mill, has lived for 8 years. 3 withdrawals. September 15th, 9:12 in the morning. $47,000 wired to an account at Bangor Savings Federal in the name of A.D. Brennan. October 27th, $52,500 to the same account. November 8th, $43,287 to the same account. $143,287. 3 transfers. 1 signature on file for the power of attorney that authorized them. My signature. On a document I had never signed. At 6:08, I walked downstairs to the mailbox. A certified envelope from Sandra Williams Notary Services in Ellsworth had been delivered the Friday before Christmas. The power of attorney inside was dated August 12, 2025. 3 signatures on the final page: Patrick Donovan, Linda Donovan, née O'Connell, Catherine Margaret Donovan. The third was not mine. The hand had tried. The hand had failed. In 2 specific ways and 3 small ones. At 6:30 in the morning, Christmas Day, I drafted a single email to 2 recipients. Subject line: forgery, need help. The body was 4 sentences. I attached the certified envelope, scanned in flat color, both sides of every page. I attached the 3 Vanguard wire confirmations. I sent the email. The 2 recipients were James Sutherland, managing partner at the firm, and Margaret Vance, a forensic document examiner in Boston who had given expert testimony at a Maine probate trial I had assisted on in 2022. I had her address saved. I had used it once. I did not sleep on Christmas Day. Jim Sutherland called me back at 7:15 in the morning, the 26th of December. He did not say Merry Christmas. He said, "Catherine, my dear, come into the office Monday at 9. I have cleared the morning." The Monday morning was the 29th of December. I drove to the Cumberland building before sunrise. The cleaners had not yet finished the lobby. The 12th floor was dark except for the corner office. Jim is 61 years old. He has worn the same maroon polka dot bow tie to every Monday morning meeting for the 12 years I have worked at the firm. That morning, the bow tie was the only thing in the room that looked like it had slept. He had the power of attorney spread across the conference table. He had pulled the Vanguard wire confirmations into a separate stack. He had a yellow legal pad open to a fresh page. He looked at me for a long moment over the top of his wire-rimmed reading glasses. "Catherine," he said, "there is something I should have told you a long time ago. Consider this the right moment." I sat down. "Florence Donovan was my client," Jim said. "Your grandmother, from 1978 to 2010. I prepared her last will and testament in March of the year she died, and I executed her estate. Pat refused the inheritance because the house in Bangor was already in his name, and Florence had little else of value. The will named you, my dear. Florence asked me to look after the granddaughter who would become a lawyer. She used those exact words. She had been telling me you would become a lawyer since you were 11 years old." I did not speak. I looked at the bow tie. "I have been waiting," Jim said, "for the moment when looking after you required more than passing you good work. I am going to ask you not to file this complaint as Catherine Donovan, my dear. I am going to ask you to file it as Sutherland and Pike on behalf of Catherine Donovan. By 10 that morning, Jim had subpoena drafts ready for Bangor Savings Federal, Vanguard, and Sandra Williams Notary Services in Ellsworth. He pulled the bank records on a friend of the firm courtesy by noon. We had 3 confirmations of receipt for the wires at A.D. Brennan's account. Bangor Savings Federal account number ending in 4618. Holder, Ashley Donovan Brennan. Address listed as 124 Wilson Street, Brewer, Maine. The storefront address of the Lash Lounge by Ashley. The account had been opened in March of 2023, the same month Ashley signed the salon lease. The 3 transfers had been received on the same business day they were sent. The first transfer of $47,000 was followed 2 business days later by a payment of $46,500 to a commercial landlord in Brewer, Penobscot Property Holdings, LLC. 8 months of back rent on the salon. The second transfer of $52,500 was followed by a credit card payment of $39,000 to Capital One, the principal on Ashley's personal Visa. The balance had been split across 4 small payments labeled salon equipment. The third transfer of $43,287 had not yet been spent. It was sitting in the Bangor Savings Federal account on the 29th of December, 2025. She kept a cushion, Jim said. She believed she had 4 months before anyone would check. I counted. November 8th to December 25th, 47 days. She had been 5 days off. Margaret Vance answered my second email on the 30th of December. She has worked for 24 years out of a forensic lab on Boylston Street in Boston, formerly with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, now independent. 55 years old. Reading glasses pushed up into a short salt and pepper afro. She has examined documents in over 600 Massachusetts and Maine criminal cases. She drove up to Portland on the 2nd of January, 2026. We met at the firm conference room with the original power of attorney, the 3 Vanguard wire confirmations, and a manila folder of 12 genuine documents I had assembled. Tax returns, my Maine bar admission application, the closing on the condo, a deposition cover page, 8 years of birthday cards I had sent my parents in my own hand. She opened her loop over the signature line. "Show me your signature," she said. "Sign your name on this index card." I signed. She took the card and set it under the loop alongside the power of attorney. "Catherine Margaret Donovan," she said. "You finish the M in Margaret with a small upward hook. The hook lifts about 1.5 millimeters above the baseline. Every example in this folder shows the hook. The signature on this power of attorney does not have the hook. The terminal stroke breaks downward." She did not look up from the loop. "The pressure on the crossbar of the T in Catherine is wrong. Your T has light pressure. This T has heavy pressure." The forger paused twice in the body of the name, at the H in Catherine and at the second R in Margaret. "I can see the ink pooling." She straightened. She closed the folder. "I will have a full report on your desk in 7 business days. I have seen this hand before, Catherine." That was the first thing that surprised me that week. On the morning of the 30th of December, between the 2nd and 3rd cup of coffee in my kitchen, I opened the Vanguard app on my phone. I navigated to the Recurring Transfers tab. I had set the transfer up on the 3rd of January, 2017, the week Pat retired from Bucksport Paper Mill on a partial pension because the mill announced its closure. $1,475 to the joint checking account at Bangor Savings Federal, every 15th of every month, indefinitely. 8 years, 96 transfers. $141,600 in completed monthly payments. I selected the transfer. I pressed Cancel Recurring. The app asked if I was sure. I pressed Confirm. The app asked if I wanted to schedule a replacement transfer. I pressed No. The screen returned to the main page. A small green banner read, "Recurring transfer canceled." 4 minutes. The kitchen clock above the sink read 11:18. I poured a second cup of coffee. I did not call my mother. On the 9th of January, Margaret Vance hand-delivered her report. 42 pages. Bound. 7 specific points of forgery identified on the power of attorney signature line for Catherine Margaret Donovan. 9 points on Pat's signature. 6 on Linda's. Margaret had identified the source. The pin pressure pattern, the letter formation, the pause sequence, all match samples from one identifiable hand. Ashley's hand. Margaret had pulled 3 writing samples. Ashley's filed New Hampshire wedding license application from 2015, her Lash Lounge LLC formation papers from 2021, and the back of a Christmas card Ashley had sent me in 2022 that I still kept in a desk drawer. The card thanked me, in Ashley's own hand, for sending Mom money during a hard year. It is the same writer, Margaret had written in the report's 3rd paragraph. There is no statistical doubt. On the 12th of January 2026, I walked across Federal Plaza in Portland to the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office and filed an 8-count criminal complaint against Ashley Donovan Brennan of Brewer, Maine. The complaint was transferred to the Penobscot County District Attorney's Office in Bangor by the end of the week. District Attorney William Pierce assigned Assistant District Attorney Karen Huang to the case. Karen called me at 3:12 in the afternoon on the 14th of January. "Catherine," she said, "I am going to ask you a question once. Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. Karen Huang took the case to a grand jury on the 27th of January, 2026. 8 felony counts. Aggravated forgery as a Class B felony for value above $10,000. 3 counts of forgery related to the 3 wire transfers. Identity theft as a Class C. 3 counts of theft by deception. The grand jury returned a true bill on all 8. By that time, the rest of the lights had already gone out around Ashley. Move 1 had been filed by the firm at 11:58 in the morning on the 13th of January. A lis pendens against the property at 14 Hawthorne Drive, Brewer, Maine. The 4-bedroom Ashley and Tyler had bought at the top of the market in May of 2023. A lis pendens is a public notice. It does not seize a house. It does worse than seize a house. It freezes it. No buyer will close on a house with a lis pendens. No bank will refinance one. Their adjustable mortgage was due to reset on the 1st of March. The reset was now a problem they could not lift from underneath. Move 2 arrived in my phone at 2:08 in the morning on the 17th of January. The text was from my brother-in-law, Tyler Brennan, paramedic, 34. The badge number 76 tattooed on his right forearm. "Kate, I didn't know. I swear to God. She used the HELOC for everything. She used your account for the rest. She used Aunt Patty's name on a notary line. I have screenshots. I will testify. I am leaving at 6 in the morning. Please." I texted back one word: tomorrow. He came to the firm on Sunday the 18th at 10. He sat where Jim had sat. He had not slept. He laid 11 screenshots on the conference table in chronological order. Text messages between him and Ashley from June of 25 through the 23rd of December. Ashley confessing, in text, to forging Pat's signature on a HELOC application in July. Ashley confessing, in text, to taking Aunt Patty's Social Security number off an envelope she had picked up from Augusta in October. Ashley confessing, at 3:47 in the morning of the 20th of November, that she had wired $16,000 to her own Visa from Dad's retirement thing. I asked Tyler one question. "Why now?" He said, "Because she told me Wednesday she would do it again if she had to. I'm a paramedic. I know what kind of person says that." Margaret Vance certified the metadata of the screenshots the next afternoon at 3:22. Move 3 was the arraignment. The 20th of January, 10:15 in the morning, before a magistrate at the Penobscot County Superior Courthouse, Ashley pleaded not guilty on all 8 counts. Bail was set at $50,000. Tyler did not post it. Aunt Patty did not post it. Pat and Linda Donovan did not post it. My sister spent the next 4 days in the Penobscot County Jail on Hammond Street until a friend of hers from cosmetology school named Heather wired the bond. If you have made it this far, drop a comment and tell me one word, the word your family uses to make you small. Tell me where you are watching from. Hit subscribe. What happens in courtroom 3 at 9:30 on the morning of the 5th of March is the reason this video exists. Move 4 was the slow collapse of every structure my sister had built her life on top of. The Lash Lounge by Ashley posted a closed for family emergency sign on the front window of 124 Wilson Street on the 1st of February. On the 18th, the landlord at Penobscot Property Holdings, a man named Roger Sue, taped a notice of lockout to the door. Ashley owed $4,100 in rent. She owed $7,000 more in unpaid eyelash extension wholesaler invoices. She owed $28,000 in personal credit card debt that she had been servicing with the wires from the Roth IRA. Tyler filed for divorce on the 9th of February in Penobscot County District Court. He cited financial fraud as grounds. I did not see him for 2 months. The trial began on the 24th of February. It lasted 3 court days. Margaret Vance testified for 2 hours and 17 minutes. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 22 minutes. They returned at 4:22 in the afternoon of the 27th of February. Guilty on all 8 counts. There is a part of this story I have not told you yet. On the 22nd of January, 3 days after I filed the criminal complaint, the Internal Revenue Service placed an investigative hold on the Social Security number of Patricia Margaret Donovan, age 69, retired librarian, Augusta, Maine. Ashley had typed Aunt Patty's name and Social Security number into the witness field of the forged power of attorney. 12-point Times New Roman, on a document filed at a notary in Ellsworth. Aunt Patty's monthly Social Security check did not arrive on the 1st of February. It did not arrive on the 1st of March. It did not arrive for 11 weeks. My aunt lived alone in a 1-story rental in Augusta on a fixed income of $2,140 a month, of which $1,400 was Social Security. She had $4,200 in savings. On the 5th of February, 2026, at 3:47 in the afternoon, my aunt was admitted to Maine General Hospital in Augusta with atrial fibrillation. She had felt her heart go irregular while reading a letter from the IRS at her kitchen table. She had been alone. She had driven herself to the emergency room. The triage nurse asked her if she had been under unusual stress in the last 60 days. My aunt said, "My niece's sister stole my name." She stayed 1 night. I drove to Augusta on the 6th. I sat in the chair beside her hospital bed. She was wearing a pale blue gown and the silver Celtic knot pendant her own mother had given her in 1970. Her right hand had a slight tremor. She said, "Catherine, dear, I think Florence is awfully proud of you for this." I held her hand and did not speak. I left the hospital at 3. I drove an hour north on Interstate 95 to Bangor. I arrived at Mount Hope Cemetery at 6:18 in the morning of the 12th of February. The thermometer in the dashboard read 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind out of the river was sharp enough that my eyes watered. My grandmother Florence's grave is in the older section, plot 412, under a row of bare oaks. I sat on the frozen ground. I put my earbuds in. I played the voice memo from the 15th of June, 2010, for the 6th time in 16 years. When Florence said, "Keep them whole, Catherine. They don't know how." I cried for the first time in this story. I sat at her grave for 41 minutes. When I stood up, I recorded a new memo on my phone into the drafts folder, 11 seconds long. I have not played it back. I will tell you what it says. Florence, I held them with money for 16 years. Today I let go. I am holding Aunt Patty with the law instead. That is what you didn't get to teach me, but I think you would understand. I drove back to Portland. The sentencing hearing was held at 9:30 in the morning of Thursday, the 5th of March, 2026. Courtroom 3 of the Penobscot County Superior Courthouse on Hammond Street in Bangor, Maine. 71 days from the slap. I arrived at 7:42. I wore a navy wool A-line dress, black tights, low boots. My hair was down. I wore plum burgundy matte lip color and no other makeup. Just above the hollow of my collarbone, on a silver chain, I wore my grandmother Florence's gold pocket watch. I had taken it out of my safe deposit box at Bangor Savings Federal on the 28th of February. I had worn it every day since. Aunt Patty was already in the gallery, first row, in her wheelchair. She wore the Celtic knot pendant. My leather jacket was draped over her lap. We did not speak. My mother entered the courtroom at 9:18, black wool coat. She did not look at me. She sat in the back row, alone. My father did not come. Aunt Patty had told me on the phone the night before. Pat couldn't bring himself this morning. Tyler Brennan stood in the hallway outside courtroom 3, watching through the narrow window slit in the door. He had not been called as a witness in his ex-wife's sentencing hearing. 3 journalists sat in the press row. Patrick Kavanaugh of the Bangor Daily News, Sandra Lee of the Penobscot Times, Tom Decker of Maine Public Radio. Pencils out. Ashley entered through the defendant's entrance at 9:24. Prison gray blazer and matching slacks, hair pulled back severely, no makeup. She was not wearing the pocket watch. My right hand briefly touched the watch at my collar. If you have made it this far, hit subscribe. Drop 1 word in the comments. The word your family used to make you small. The next 3 minutes are the reason this video exists, and they are the reason my sister left a courthouse in handcuffs. Court convened at 9:30. Judge Margaret O'Shaughnessy, Irish-American, 55, 21 years on the bench, read the 8 counts of conviction. District Attorney William Pierce delivered a 3-minute summary. He held up the forged power of attorney in a clear plastic evidence bag marked Exhibit A. Judge O'Shaughnessy invited the victim to make a statement. I stood. I walked to the podium. I opened my leather portfolio. I read. Your Honor, my name is Catherine Donovan. I am 38 years old. I have spent 14 years of my career as a probate lawyer in Portland, Maine, writing exactly the documents my sister forged. My grandmother, Florence Donovan, died in August of 2010. She was 82 years old. 6 weeks before she died, she recorded a voice memo on my phone. I have replayed it 4 times in 16 years. The last time was the morning of December 25th, 2025. The morning I drove home from being slapped at my parents' Christmas Eve dinner. In that memo, my grandmother said this. I pressed play on my phone. The courtroom speakers carried Florence's voice into the room. The older voice, the county cork softened by 63 years in Maine, slightly hoarse. What I noticed was, they don't know how to hold themselves together, Catherine. So you keep them whole. They don't know how. Ashley closed her eyes briefly. My mother's hand went to her own collarbone. My father was not there. I continued. For 16 years, I sent my parents $1,475 every month. That is $141,600. I co-signed for their roof, their kitchen, their second mortgage. I asked for no receipt. I asked for no thank you. Then my sister forged my signature on a power of attorney. She wired $143,287 from my retirement to her business and her credit cards. She used my Aunt Patricia's name as a reference. My aunt's Social Security was frozen for 11 weeks. My aunt is in this courtroom today, in a wheelchair, recovering from atrial fibrillation that her cardiologist directly attributed to the IRS investigation. Your Honor, I am not asking the court to punish my sister. I am asking the court to confirm what my grandmother told me when I was 22, that some promises must be kept by the law because the family forgot how. Thank you. I sat down. Aunt Patty squeezed my hand. Judge O'Shaughnessy read the sentence at 9:52. Class B aggravated forgery, 10 months. 3 forgery counts, 4 months each, concurrent. Identity theft, 6 months. 3 theft by deception counts, 4 months each, concurrent. Total, 22 months at Penobscot County Correctional Facility. 5 years probation thereafter. 240 hours of community service. Restitution of $143,287, already paid in full from the refinanced equity of the Brewer House. Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff, effective immediately. Officer Carlos Ramirez and Officer Sarah Mitchell stepped to the defendant's table. Mrs. Donovan Brennan, place your hands behind your back. Click, right wrist. Click, left. Ashley turned her head toward the back row of the gallery. My mother stood up, the first time she had moved since arrival. The two of them held eye contact for 3 seconds. My mother did not step forward. My mother did not step backward. My mother turned her head toward me. Her hand was on her own collarbone. My right hand was on the pocket watch. We held eye contact for 3 seconds. My mother gave one slow, almost imperceptible nod. She sat back down. Ashley turned her head a third time. She looked at me. We had not made eye contact in 71 days. Her mouth opened, her mouth closed. No words. I did not move. The bailiffs led her through the sheriff's door to the right of the judge's bench. The gray blazer faded into the dim corridor. The door closed with an audible thud. The time was 9:57. Judge O'Shaughnessy struck the gavel. Court adjourned. My mother walked past my row without stopping. Her wool coat brushed my elbow. Neither of us spoke. Aunt Patty leaned toward me from her wheelchair and whispered, "Florence would be proud." I did not answer. I helped her wheel out of the gallery. Tyler Brennan was waiting just outside courtroom 3 by the hallway window. He nodded once. I nodded back. Neither of us said a word. I walked out of the courthouse at 10:08. Light snowflakes were falling. The temperature was 28 degrees. At step 7 of the 12 stone steps of the courthouse, Patrick Kavanaugh of the Bangor Daily News stopped me. "Mrs. Donovan, any comment?" I looked at him. 22 months. That is about the same length of time my grandmother spent dying. The law remembers what people forget. I got in my Honda CR-V across the street. I did not start the engine for 30 seconds. I watched the courthouse doors. The snow caught in my hair. Then I drove south. On the 12th of April, 2026, I sold my share of the Brewer House deed back to Tyler for $1. He had taken sole title in the divorce. The deed cleanup made the Lis Pendens release possible. I drove the paperwork up myself. We met in the parking lot of a Dunkin' on Outer Main Street. He nodded once. I nodded back. Neither of us spoke. On the 17th of May, Aunt Patty drove down to Portland with a sealed manila envelope. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter from my father. I have not shown it to anyone. I will not tell you what it said, except that the first sentence was, "Catherine, I have been a coward." Folded inside the letter was the velvet jewelry box my grandmother's pocket watch had lived in for 15 years. My mother had taken it back from Ashley the morning of the 20th of January. The note in my father's hand read, "Your mother gave this to your sister. Your grandmother gave it to you. We were wrong. It is yours." I had been wearing the watch every day since the 28th of February. I did not put a second one on. I returned the velvet box to the top shelf of my closet, empty. On the 10th of June, Aunt Patty's Social Security was restored. The IRS sent her a check for the 11 months of missed payments in one lump sum plus interest. She bought a new winter coat. She mailed me a thank you card written in her librarian's hand. On Christmas Eve, the 24th of December, 2026, I drove the 200 miles from Portland to Bangor. I attended 10 o'clock midnight mass at St. John's Catholic Church on State Street. I sat in the third pew on the left side. My grandmother Florence's gold pocket watch was visible at my collar. My mother sat in the 5th pew across the aisle. We did not speak. We saw each other once. She nodded. I nodded back. I did not stay for coffee in the parish hall. I drove south. The thing about keeping a family whole is that sometimes the family is whole the moment you stop trying to keep it whole. My grandmother did not get to teach me that, but I think she would understand. If you knew that the price of keeping your family together was your own retirement, your own name on a forged document, your own aunt in a hospital bed, would you have walked into 10 below zero that night? Or would you have apologized? Tell me in the comments where you were watching from, what you would have done. Subscribe. There is another story like this one I have not yet told.